Uh-oh.
Thank you, Lord.
Thank you.
Get your questions ready for the live fishing call-in show. For the next hour, we have a panel of guests to answer all of your fishing questions. 1-800-944-4664.
Look at that.
The live Kentucky Afield call-in show starts right now.
Such a pretty fish.
Beautiful.
This pond is plumb loaded with frogs.
They're everywhere in here. Yeah, this is a good fish right here. Really good fish.
Come here, girl.
Hey, boy. That's a big rabbit.
Nice job. Yes! Yes! My first muskie. Mercy Leo!
Yeah, look at it. It's a keeper.
Here it goes. Boom. Oh!
Wow, that happened fast.
Hello and welcome to Kentucky Afield. I'm your host, Chad Miles. Tonight, we're here to talk about one of my very favorite topics, and that's fishing here in the state of Kentucky. Joining me, I have three experts here to answer all of your questions. We've already got a ton of questions from Facebook, but if you want to ask your question, you can reach us at 1-800-944-4664. To my left here, I have Jeff Ross, Fisheries Biologist. How you doing, Jeff?
Good.
We also have Jeff Crosby. Both these guys have been on here quite a few times. They've been on the water quite a bit, and they've got a lot of information for you, so make sure you call. And then answering all of our law enforcement questions, we have a newcomer to the program, Officer Cody Barry. Welcome.
How you doing?
Hey, you may notice this show is quite a bit earlier than we've done it in years past. And, we've been saying, hey, if you fish the state of Kentucky, the best time to be out there, what's your favorite month?
Oh, March, April.
March, April. What's your favorite month?
Probably the same.
What would you think?
Yeah, same.
We've been doing this show in late April after turkey season for quite some time, and we want to get the information out there and make sure that people ask the questions and start planning their fishing trips a little bit earlier. So I've been on the water a couple times this year. I've already had some success, and we're looking forward to being on the water a lot the next 2 months. So let's get straight to our questions. First question is Chris, is a Facebook question. Why doesn't Lake Cumberland have the big blue and flathead catfish like Barkley and Kentucky lakes?
I'm sure there's some out there, but it's probably mostly a productivity difference between the west and, the southeast and such, and water temperatures and things like that. But I'm sure there's, a few, but just not as many.
Okay. Larry Mitchell, his Facebook question. Saugeye are now in the new local lake. What's the best bait for catching them? Everybody wants to catch saugeye. I mean, when you put those in a new lake, everyone wants to get out there and learn techniques to catch them. And they can be a little more difficult fish to target.
They have proven to be a little difficult. A lot of people do struggle, but you can, pick some up here and there. A lot of people are using crankbaits. Some are using, jigs. I've caught them fishing for bass on plastic worms before. But I think the crankbaits are probably a little bit better, and also, pulling a jig. Sometimes I'll tip them with night crawlers and do pretty well. But sometimes they can prove a little difficult in some of the lakes.
You can catch them up off the bottom, but I'd say the closer to the bottom you are, your productivity goes up. So if you're fishing water that's 10 feet deep, you want to throw a bait will run 10 feet deep or close to it, don't you?
Yes.
And try to fish in the top 2 or 3 feet of the water and catch saugeye is a really rough thing to do. So make sure you're fishing on the bottom or close to it.
Now, my son caught several because he was fishing at a jig a lot slower than I was. So, yes, it's pretty important to stay contacted with the bottom.
This time of year, cold water, you almost can't fish too slow, can you?
No.
Just slow down and take your time and enjoy the scenery. Doug, from his Facebook question, wants to know what happened to the sauger in Kentucky Lake below Kentucky Dam. Any information there?
I don't know. It's never been a real strong population. We've had some issues with Asian carp pushing some fish around down there, but I'm not sure. I haven't heard much about it.
They've had some spawning issues at times, but I think it's, probably most of the time you deal with poor reproduction a lot of times, or lack of spawning success.
So there's all these species of walleye, sauger, sawguy, and a lot of times it can be hard, even for an experienced angler, even a biologist, to tell at certain time frames at ages. It's hard to tell the difference. There's been some rule changes and regulations on that, hasn't there?
Yeah, and we actually, that's a good time to mention that, and that may be part of the reason why he's not seeing the fish. In the Ohio River, they did a big study and found that the numbers were dropping, and not a lot of fish over 3 years old, and not a lot of big fish. So we changed the regs along with Ohio, and they're working on it in all the Ohio River states. So it's a 6 fish, 14-inch size limit, try to protect the fish a little bit. But that may be a
it's
reason
combined. You can have 2 walleye, a sauger, and 3 sawguy. It doesn't matter.
Right.
It's 14 inches, 6 fish combined, all in one creel.
And he may be seeing what we were seeing on the Ohio River with the population kind of in a little bit of a decline.
So for people that want to target, we're getting all these sawguy and sauger questions. You're talking about spawn. Obviously, that's a good time to fish for them. When do those fish spawn?
Pretty much right now, they're making their migration, and a lot of times they'll hit a lot of the locks and dams on these rivers and kind of get held up there, and so they congregate below a lot of these locks and dams. So it's a great time of year to get out and to, go after those fish.
Make sure you're wearing your life jacket, fishing anywhere this time of year, but definitely below those locks and dams.
Definitely.
Here's a law enforcement question. Andrew it's an Instagram question. Wants to know if children have their own daily krill limits, or do the fish they keep count as part of the adult limit that they're fishing with?
So they have the same krill limit as the adult would. So your adult, if they're fishing for walleye or sauger, like you said, they can have 6, and then the adult can have 6, so it's the same.
So as long as they are their own entity when it comes to krill?
Yes.
All right. Perry Kane's Facebook question. The season for snagging rough fish ends in early May. He wants to know if that includes snagging bait fish. I think he's wanting to know if he can use a light at night and snag shad.
It probably depends a little bit on what he's using. You know, if he's using a single hook, rod with a jerking motion, then it wouldn't be allowed past that time. I think if they're using like the sabiki rigs, where there's actual feathers, which would constitute a lure, I think, then he probably could. But it sounds like under the lights, he may be just trying to snag them, which we probably won't extend that just because we run into other problems with other species and such.
It's really hard for a person to figure out what they're targeting. I mean, they run into this issue up north as well.
Right.
Because in some places up north, the smallmouth literally have a season like a hunting season. It's really hard to say, well, no, I'm actually targeting this species of fish.
Right.
So, yeah, that becomes a little iffy. John, Facebook question, another sawguy question. Can sawguy be put into Kincaid Lake to help control some of the crappie population?
Probably right now we're not looking at expanding that sawguy stocking too much right now, as we're again still trying to evaluate the lakes that we are stocking now. I mean, it could be a possibility down the road, but Kincaid is a great bass lake, and it's a great fishery, and it's especially this time of year in March, early April, you could catch a very largemouth up there right now.
Oh, yeah. You know, the biggest bass I've caught in a long time, I actually caught last year in late March. And I tell you, you slow down, those big fish will move into those shallow waters. And the really, really big fish, that's the time of year to catch one, isn't it?
Right. Yeah. We see a lot of good fish even in February.
Yes, can't see them earlier.
So make sure you're getting out there. You know, water conditions are hopefully going to improve. We've had a lot of rain, a lot of stained water, it's a bad combination when you're bass fishing or crappie fishing and you have cold, dark water. It's a hard time to catch fish. We're not supposed to have a whole lot of rain over the next few days, so hopefully the water clears up a little bit. Phil, what is the best time to fish for the white bass run? Hey, this is one of my favorite things to do, get out and white bass fish.
Yeah, generally you're looking for water temperatures moving into we'll say the mid-50s, which for us here, we're talking probably early April. This year, maybe a little earlier, because it does seem to be warming up a little bit sooner than this year than it has in the past. But generally, we want the water temperatures in that low 50, mid 50 range, which is generally, we'll say, that 1st of April. And when we get the right rains at the right times and the currents coming down, of course, that pulls a lot of those fish up. So
we have a couple of extraordinary white bass streams here in the state of Kentucky. We've fished numerous ones, and No Land's probably my favorite just because of the number of 15, 16, 17-inch fish. It's pretty amazing. But tell me some others.
Well, Harrington, it's historic for, some really good white bass runs. We see some same size white bass, those 14, 15, 16 inchers. Taylorsville is very good for numbers, not quite that good of quality, but you'll see them up, 12, 13 inches there. But those are some really good, at least in our area that I work, those are two really good places to go for white bass in the spring.
There is a, not for the first time, but a really good population in fish trap.
Okay.
Which people probably don't realize, but the biologists out there said this is probably the year to go after them.
Okay, there you go. You heard it right there. A new tip for white bass fishing. A lot of times that might be the first species that people go out for. If they, if they kind of fish here and there and they get excited, they get that cabin fever. White bass is a really good species to go target because if you get on them, you're going to catch a bunch of fish. And they're such hard fighting fish for their size. They're a lot of fun to catch. Here's a Facebook question. David is wanting to know if he can expect to see any tighter regulations on smallmouths in streams. He said 15-inch fish are really getting hard to find, and he thinks it's due to the boom in kayak fishing. What's your all's thoughts?
So stream smallmouth populations, we've not had a lot of data on a lot of the streams, so we actually started up a streams research section, and really they're going out right now and sampling a lot of these streams we didn't have data on. So, some of this will be that we just didn't have the data on them. We have seen, like at Green River Lake or Green River, that they looked at exploitation or how many fish were being taken out, and it was really low. So it's going to probably depend on the stream. But we're in the midst of collecting data, so that's not to say that we won't put regs where they need to be.
We want to make sure that there's a catchable population of all age classes of all the fish species. I mean, that's really what your goal is. It's, as biologists, right? You want to have recruitment and good populations throughout the age classes, right?
Correct. And again, we don't see, a lot of the studies we do creel-wise, people don't harvest black bass. I mean, it's just not something that's done often. But again, where we go in and see maybe there is some more exploitation, like which they didn't see, there could be regulations put on those situations or those streams.
Times have changed so much over the last 30 years, and I think a lot of it is tournament fishing with black bass and largemouth bass. Where I can remember seeing pictures of people back in the 70s and 80s with stringers of bass, and when they went out and you caught a largemouth, you kept it. That really has changed a lot, to the point where I have fished some ponds that there's so little harvest of those fish that the fish are stunted. So if you have a pond and you're seeing a whole lot of small bass, the best thing to do is start keeping some of them, right?
Correct. We get a lot of phone calls where people have trouble growing bass, and that's generally because their populations are overcrowded. And so, sometimes harvesting bass in certain instances can be very beneficial because it does thin down the population. The fish that are left have more food. They can grow better, have better fish. But there is a point that you can go too far with that, and you can overexploit a lake or a stream. But this day and age, it's not very common.
All right, next question. This is from DJ in Laurel County. He wants to know what the best lake is to catch yellow perch in Kentucky. He wants a place near Laurel County. He's in the right spot to look for a perch, isn't he?
I think so. What we're hearing is that what comes to mind for me is Linville.
Yep.
Linville Lake, which is there near Mount Vernon. I believe that's where that is. And we're talking with the biologist down there. She's talking like they're seeing some yellow perch there, and actually a few decent ones at times. So
I've seen pictures, and I've talked to people at Linville Lake, and they said they are catching some yellow perch down there. Now, some people who are not from, or they're from Kentucky and mainly fish our lakes may confuse that with a yellow bass. Now, perch tell me the difference in what they look like between a perch and a bass.
Well, I mean, the yellow bass is going to be looking more like we'll say a white bass or a hybrid. I mean, it's in that family, what they call Maronies. But so it's going to look more like a white bass in that temperate bass family. The yellow perch is going to look more in the walleye family. But it's going to be a little bit more scrunched up, we'll say, in a little bit different color. So but it's in that family with the walleye. But so they are a little bit different. We're a little too far south for real good yellow perch. So that's the reason I don't think we have great populations or would have great populations in the state. We're just not at that right latitude, we'll say.
So we don't manage that particular fish species here in the state of Kentucky, right?
No.
Are there any regulations on those?
No.
No.
Okay, so if a person does go down there and catches one, there's no size length limit for that?
I do not believe so.
Okay. All right, John from Frankfurt wants to know if Elmer Davis Lake is going to be a good spot for some pan fishing this year. He's got the right idea.
Yes, he does. Yeah, we're real excited about Elmer Davis right now. It's it's fishing well. The populations look great from the panfish. We'll say the bluegill red ear look really good. The crappie look great, and so do the bass. I mean, right now the lake it's fishing well, and it's going to be a great opportunity. I think it's going to be a great spring, as long as we have no weird weather conditions, like more rain.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, it's been the last couple of years. It's been the winter fishing, which was my favorite times to fish. I can't remember a time where I canceled more fishing trips due to high water and stained water as I have the last couple of years. So hopefully this pattern kind of goes on and lets me do some more wintertime fishing. Mike from Franklin County, he wants to know what's happened to the Helgamites in Elkhorn Creek. You guys seeing any reduction in Helgamites in Elkhorn?
It's not really anything that we look at per se, because you're dealing with an insect. But the interesting thing about Helgamites, they have a 2-year life cycle. So I mean, it takes a while for them to go through their process when you compare it to other insects. Mm-hmm. So, we've heard that for a while. We, especially after the flood of '97, we started hearing that comment a lot about having a hard time to find them. I went out, with the kids at that time, we would find some, they were still there. But, I do think that based on their life cycles, some of this, since 2010, we've had a lot more rain our rain has been a lot more, we'll say, intense over the years than maybe back in the 80s or something. So I think maybe that may have something to do with it also. It's just the kind of climate we're in right now.
Okay.
Will affect them.
Here's another question. This is a crayfish question. Bill from Bullitt County, he wants to know what crayfish color patterns to use on a crankbait to match the color in different times of the year. Do you have any thoughts on changing the color of your crankbait to match the color of the crayfish?
If early season muddy, talk about muddy water right now, I like a red one this time of year. I've had a few good days, throwing a reddish crankbait, again, in that off-color water. You get more toward clear water, you want more toward natural colors. But the bright colors, I think, it kind of goes conditions and seasons.
What you said is really interesting to me, because if I was going to answer the question, it would be very similar to how you answered it. And that is, I wouldn't be so worried about what the actual fish how they change in the water column. Like say crayfish are orange and green with tips on there that are. I wouldn't be so concerned what they look like. Match the watercolor with the right color bait. Dark stained water, you want to throw more reds and more bright colors. And clear colored water, you want to throw more silvers and whites.
Natural colors.
The natural colors, yeah. I don't know that the fish really care. If they see it, they're going to eat it, right?
It's going to be a reaction bite.
Yeah.
So.
Ron from Jefferson County wants to know if a 200 horsepower motor is allowed on Cedar Creek Lake. Any answers here?
It would have a special rig probably on it.
I think it's allowed.
I can't remember. I think that you're allowed to run a.
I think so.
Have they
There's
changed that?
nothing that comes to mind, is what I'm sitting there thinking. But I know we at one time were dealing with motor size regulations.
Yeah,
but
I
I'm
think
not
it's
sure.
allowed.
I'm pretty sure it's allowed. Hey, we're going to check back on that one, because that's one that I'm not really sure. I've been on that Cedar Creek Lake with a boat, and I'm pretty sure that it was allowed. It was allowed to run, but we'll check back on that one. Check our Facebook page on any question that we can't get an answer for tonight. Check back either on our Facebook, or you could always call the Department of Fish and Wildlife Info Center and get an answer at any point in time. You don't have to wait for the call-in show. That's 1-800-858-1549 and ask one of those information specialists. They'd be glad to help you out. And man, those guys are a wealth of knowledge. All right, let's go to the next one. Jerry from Butler County wants to know if it's legal to catch suckers by gigging them, and what time of year do they run in the streams? This is an interesting question.
They're going to be running here very shortly. You're looking at, again, probably about the time in which the white bass are running, they should be running too. Again, probably that late March through April time frame.
Have you guys ever gigged suckers? That's something you've ever done?
I have never done it.
I will tell you that the people that tell me that they gig suckers and can that meat and make salmon patties out of them. They're obviously not salmon, but it's similar to a salmon patty, and absolutely love that. I've never
eaten
done
it, and it was really good.
Oh, really?
And,
Okay.
But I've never actually gone out.
They do need to remember the gigging season is February 1st to May 10th.
Okay.
So if it's
It has
past
to
May
be-
10th, then
It has to be
can't
done during
gigging
that time.
them. Yep.
That's a
That's
situation.
generally the time frame.
Yeah.
That's going to be a situation where watercolor is going to be really important because you have to be able to see through the water and see these fish.
And water level.
And water level. Yeah, exactly. David from Hardin County, are walleyes still being stocked in No Lynn? If so, how's that going?
They've been stocked every year. Nolan, that's the lake we're trying to look at a little bit more. We're actually doing a creel survey this year, so we'll be collecting some more data on what the anglers are catching. But Nolan's one of our lakes. We put a lot of walleye in, but we don't see a whole lot coming out. So we're trying to figure out, is it just lack of cool water habitat or, what's going on. A lot of the lakes are starting to get a little more eutrophic, more productive, and the walleye at some point, don't have the habitat they need. So we're looking at it a little closer, but we have been putting walleye in every year, and we still are.
Okay. Steve from Jefferson County wants to know, where is a good place to get started with kayak fishing? That is, I'm not sure if he's talking about a place to go to look for kayaks, but let's talk about bodies of water that set up really well for kayak
In
fishing.
the Jefferson County?
He is from Jefferson County.
I would say you got, there in Jefferson County, you got McNeely Lake. It's a 51-acre lake there in the southern part. They're off Cooper Chapel Road. It's good. It's a very good panfish lake. It's got some decent bass in it too. We stock catfish in it. So it's again, it's a really good place to get started because it's a trolling motor only lake. So that's a very good place to go.
Floyd's Fork.
You got Floyd's Fork would be a great place to go. Beautiful. I mean, that's a really pretty stream.
It sure is. I was raised right on Floyd's Fork and fished it many, many years, and it's a beautiful stretch of water.
There's some nice fish in that. I mean, being on Elkhorn sampling and being on that one, it's a lot like Elkhorn. It just doesn't have quite the numbers, but it's got some of the quality. So there's some really nice smallmouth to be caught.
There's been some conversation about kayak fishing, and man, that is something that is booming in popularity. And I will tell you this, unless you have a lot of experience paddling, kayak fishing can be highly productive, but you might want to start out in non-moving water. We have a lot of great areas to fish, but if fishing and boat control with moving water, it's something that takes a little bit of time to figure out. If you're someone who wants to fish some streams, you might want to go down and find you a spot where you have permission, where you can stand up, make some casts, and get back in the kayak, or try to learn how to maneuver that kayak on somewhere like McNeely Lake. Right. Because what I noticed when I first started kayak fishing is boat control with a paddle and casting is not an easy thing. It takes some experience.
But we've got, there's a lot of lakes. I think a lot of our small lakes around the area, Benji Lake, which isn't too far. It's a great place to go. Jericho Lake there in Henry County also. Again, these are lakes that are not going to be a bad place to go. And then you've got some streams. Green River is a great fishery.
Oh,
And
yeah.
so if you get used to paddling in current, that's a good place to go.
Absolutely. We're blessed here in the state of Kentucky with streams and small lakes and big lakes. Kayaks can be for really, really big water. If you watch people down in the ocean, they kayak fish in the ocean. So big waters, as long as you're being careful and make sure that you're very visible to boaters out there. But big bodies of water can be extremely productive for kayak fishing. I don't know if we just did a piece on Dale Hollow about 2 months ago, and we never went out of sight of the ramp, and we're catching 4 and 5 pound smallies pretty regularly. So it's big water doesn't need to be overlooked. It can be excellent out of a kayak. Donald from Grant County, how do otters get in the lakes, and what can be done to help control them? Otters is not really it's not really a fish. It's the fishing calling show, but I don't know why they're asking, because they can be pretty voracious when it comes to eating fish.
Yeah, they can. The department stocked them back in the 90s, I believe, and their populations have expanded. I mean, you can trap them, and trappers can trap them. That's how populations can be controlled. I deal with a lot of landowners that talk about them, in ponds and stuff, and not to say they do eat fish, but I think a lot, when you especially talk about black bass and stuff, it's very low percentage. I think the study that UK did, they looked at like 170 stomachs, and of which I think 126 had content. Of that, 108 had fish in it, but only 6 of them had a black bass in them.
Really?
So, I mean, the thing you got to realize, there's a lot of fish out there in these streams other than, maybe what we want to fish for, suckers, shad, other sunfish, long ear and all that. And, they're feeding on a lot of that, as much more so than they really are feeding on what we sport fish, what we're after. So.
Okay. Charles from Laurel County wants to know what the fishing forecast looks like for bass and walleye around Old London Boat Dock area of the Cumberland and Rockcastle River. Did anybody have any information on that area?
I know, well, not on that area specific. The Cumberland drainage, or at least Lake Cumberland itself, the bass, largemouth and such is picked up pretty well.
Good.
But I don't think we have any information up there.
Talk a little bit about the fishing forecast. For anyone all over the state of Kentucky, we actually put out a document that's pretty significant, and we're talking about 50, 60 pages of information all over the state of Kentucky for all the different game fish. Tell me a little bit about what all's in there and where that can be found, because it's out for 2020. So if any body of water that you're interested in fishing in throughout the state of Kentucky, and you want to know more information about different fish species and what the forecast would be, good, poor, or whatever, there's a place they can find all that information.
Yeah, it's the fishing forecast is really good. It's based on a lot of our biologist sampling. So if they haven't sampled in a certain area, like up in that area, we won't have that forecast for that area, but like Cumberland's covered. But it covers every district. It lists all the game fish species for each lake, whether it's going to be good, poor, fair, excellent. Gives some ideas of how to fish for them. And if you just wanted to do it real quick, in the very back of it, it has a cheat sheet, and it just lists for each species the lakes that are going to be good or excellent fishing for those species. So if you don't want to read through the whole thing, you go to the back of the book and look up bluegill and find out which lakes you have the best chance of catching them and head out.
It really is a very, very great piece of information. Something that we've all looked at a little bit that's going to be coming out sometime this year is an app that controls some of that information. Also has some of all the GPS locations where the department puts out structure. That app, it's got the boat ramps and all that in there. It's not out yet. I've seen it. It's going to be very impressive. So keep an eye out for that too. I don't know when it's going to be out, but when it comes out, if you're a fisherman in the state of Kentucky, you're going to want to download that app. It also has links to the fishing forecast every single year as well. It's going to be a great app to help you out, help you navigate to the water and on the water. John, Cumberland Lake spring fishing. He wants to know March and April time frame for crappie or striped bass. What's going to be the best, and what productive fishing techniques would you recommend?
Well, for stripers, really the night as we get into April, May, you start getting into that night surface bite. That's always a lot of fun. That's an adrenaline rush. As you have a 10-pound striper blow up on a surface bait in the dark. That's always a lot of fun. I know a lot of people that will do, whether they use live shad. There's some options for that. That's where maybe getting a guide is helpful there to help you out with some of those techniques. But crappie, I don't remember
Just back
what
up,
the forecast is for that. But for there, again, getting up in those creeks, finding some cover, finding those spawning flats, that are adjacent to that be really good. Now, smallmouth, in March, is always a lot of fun down on Cumberland. So that's usually a great time to get into some decent, smallmouth fishing.
I think typically for striped bass, they're up in the creeks earlier and then work their way out. So,
some people that I know that crappie fish Cumberland, the people who know that lake absolutely love crappie fish in Cumberland. I think it can be hard to locate fish, but if you find them, the size of the fish in Lake Cumberland is pretty impressive for crappie, isn't it?
yeah, there's good sizes, and there's another year class coming up. They're like 5 to 7 inches right now, but it's a strong one. So hopefully that bodes well for the future. We got a lot of big ones, but as they start to peter out, we got another year class coming up that should fill in there.
Good. Gary from Marshall County says he turns 65 in June. He wants to know if he has to wait till his birthday to buy a senior license.
He turned 65 when?
In June.
In June. Well, he'll have to go ahead and buy his annual license for your regular, or if he goes fishing, he'll have to buy a $23 license. If he hunts, he'll have to buy the regular amount.
So, but if he wants to fish prior to
Yes,
June.
before,
And I wouldn't wait till June for.
No, if he wants to fish and, if he wants to wait till June, then he can get his senior license in June and be okay.
Okay. Sam from Mason County wants to know if during flood conditions, where do the tributaries of a river end for regulation reasons? This is always a tough one, isn't it?
Yeah. So as far as lakes go, this year we've actually got, I don't know if he's talking about tribs coming into lakes or tribs coming into the rivers, but for tribs coming into the lakes, it's the first riffle. But we've had some lakes, that can change depending on water levels. This year for Green, Cave Run, and Nolin, I think it was it may have been Rough. We actually set boundaries, specific boundaries like bridges and boat ramps, so that location is always known, because I think law enforcement's had some issues because if you have a lake like Cave Run with an 18-inch smallmouth limit, if somebody's above and outside of the lake proper, then they're down to 12-inch size limit. So, not knowing where they're at, they can say, well, I'm not in the lake anymore. So
it really
we
does
set
depend.
defined boundaries. Yeah, it changes because of the water levels.
But it really depends on the body of water as well, because it very well may be a permanent structure like a bridge.
Yes, if it's not in our special regs as listed as specific things, then it is the first riffle, of the tributaries coming into the lake.
All right. Here's a good question, because I've already got some people asking me this question. This is Will from Knott County. Wants to know if there's any plan to stock rainbow trout in Laurel or Cedar Creek anytime soon. Talk to me a little bit about what's going on with trout stocking in these lakes.
So in general with trout stocking, this year, Wolf Creek Hatchery, which provides all our trout, they're down below Lake Cumberland. They've had some production issues, and we had some gaps in the numbers of fish, so we had to shift some numbers around. So people will notice that this year. Hopefully that's just this year, and we'll go back to normal for everything next year. But Laurel is not getting stocked this year. We have been stocking it every year, and we hope to after this year.
So we're not stopping, it's just because of production
we are short fish, and we just had to make some tough calls on where we're going to put them.
So I'm guessing you guys have a certain priority that on how you allocate trout. If you end up with 200,000 trout instead of 2 million trout, you have to then figure out what's priority one.
Right.
What is highest priority?
So access is important. We look at use, that's something we're looking at more and more to try to figure out which streams, if we don't want to put a bunch of trout in the stream that one person goes to for the whole year. Being close to population centers, if we can, an Otter Creek is a great example because right by Louisville, and so that's a great place to do it. Kentucky doesn't have great trout water. Most of the streams do not support trout through the summer. They get too warm. So really, we could put trout anywhere. So that's why we drop back to which streams have the best temperature, the longest, good access, and then, will people use them?
This particular caller asked specifically about Laurel Lake and Cedar Creek, and you look at those lakes, which are really trophy lakes. I have to think that if we're trying to allow more access to people to catch them, putting them in those type of lakes, some of those fish are being eaten by trophy fish.
Yeah, and Cedar Creek, we did put them in, but we stopped, and that's a usage thing. We just found that the usage of those trout was really low, and we pay for those trout, so we want to put them where people are going to use them. So that's the reason why we stopped at Cedar Creek. There are a lot of people that want us to put them in our bass lakes just to grow bigger bass.
That's a technique that's been used in some other states.
Yes.
It's a pretty costly technique, though. So.
Yes.
For now, Laurel Lake, not this year.
Not
We're
this
hoping to
year.
get back
Yep.
to that next year,
Yep.
pending production
Right.
pickups at Wolf Creek.
Yep.
Caleb from Barren County, where are the best spots to fly fish in the state of Kentucky? That depends on what you're fishing for, but where would you go fly fishing tomorrow?
Fly fishing for trout, definitely Cumberland River.
Yeah.
I mean, that would be the place to go. Beautiful area. If I'm going to go for panfish, to say in May, I would be going to Elmer or Beaver or Corinth lakes. Those are some really great panfish lakes in the central part of the state. I've had a lot of people talk about fly fishing. I've had in the past, even for white bass during the spawning run.
I see people fly fishing for white bass every time I go. There's always some people out there that are pulling flies, and they're pretty successful.
So, again, there's fly fishing. We always look back toward trout, but I think there's a lot of opportunities, even for largemouth in a lot of these lakes, if you're using, again, the right bait.
I tell you, someone that's very, very familiar to all you guys out there, a good friend of mine, Tim Farmer, he bluegill fishes with a fly rod. That's his favorite way to catch them. And it's something that he does.
Very good at it.
Yeah, he's very, very good at doing it as well. So don't think you have to be trout fishing. As a matter of fact, if you live somewhere and you're just getting into fly fishing, go to a pond, catch those bluegill, learn your cast. And I'm not a very good fly fisherman, but if I was going to pick that up and become very proficient, I'd probably go to the closest body of water and learn my cast and catch fish like bluegill.
Right.
Tim from Campbell County wants to know what the possibility of getting a boat ramp in the Ohio River in Cumberland or in Campbell County. I don't know the access areas up there.
Yeah,
you looking
it would be
at any
specific to. I'm not sure. We have a specific process for putting boat ramps in, and there's an application process. So, he may want to talk to the county and see, if they have ideas of where it would be best, and then if the county or somebody can put together the application and submit it, then we review them. And we see, there's a lot, we grade them based on location and, the need. And things like
Everybody
that.
wants a boat ramp,
Yes,
don't they?
right.
And it's really working in cooperation with a municipality that
Right.
will pull trash or spray it off if you're on a
Right.
river, the water comes up, when it leaves, it just doesn't leave a beautiful boat ramp.
Right,
It's a mess.
especially
isn't
on
it?
the river. That's, it's very important to have them in the right spot, or they're just going to, sediment over, and that'll be the end of it. And we have a real small engineering division, so we can only do so many.
But we're putting some ramps in
Yes.
in the Ohio
fact,
River
we're-
right now.
Yeah, in Louisville, that's a new
Shawnee Park,
project.
yeah,
Yep.
is a brand new project. So really, if you're in an area that you want a boat ramp, you really want to work to your local government and have them ask Fish and Wildlife for a boat ramp. That's a great place to start, right? Ed from Jefferson County wants to know if there's a website available to see all the lake levels, specifically Rough River and Taylorsville.
I use the core website. That would probably, the problem is you're not going to get all the lakes, for the state, but you'll get what's in the Louisville district, which Rough River and Taylorsville, and I believe Green, and a lot of them are, there's several of them, in Kentucky that you can, they've got what they have a daily lake report that you can look at, and so it's a great resource, and it shows you the current levels and if it's going up or down, and a lot of that good information. Other than that, you probably have USGS. They have gauges around the state. and you would have to search for the lake that way. So going to a one-stop shop would be tough.
Unfortunately, the Army Corps of Engineers, we have several different offices that manage the watersheds in the state of Kentucky, and they're not the same website with the same look and feel. They're all totally different. But I will tell you that if you learn how to navigate those, and if the information's up to date, it's a great place to start before you head to the water, because it'll tell you dissolved oxygen levels and show you the thermocline as well. If you know how to read that chart, you can find out exactly what depth you need to not fish below.
Below is exactly right.
And that's really good information, because some of our lakes, I'll get Taylorsville, for example, sometimes that thermocline in the summertime will set up where if you get much more than 15, 18 feet deep, you're too deep.
You're very much too deep.
Sometimes it's even more shallow than that.
It's shallower than that at times.
So it's a great place to start. If you feel like you're not being real productive on those lakes, check out that website, the Army Corps of Engineers. It might be the Louisville district for the lakes that this gentleman was asking for, with Taylorsville Lake and Rough River, and it might be the Knoxville.
It's Nashville district, and then Huntington.
Huntington,
Those
okay.
are the three that.
Yeah, the Huntington
I'm sorry. If you just type in Nashville Army Corps, it'll be the first link on there, or Huntington Army Corps.
But give those guys a call and ask about that information, and it's a really good place to start off before you take a fishing trip. Dan in Fayette County, white bass fishing at night used to be very popular. Wants to know why that's slowed down a little bit.
I think at Harrington that was very popular, especially under the lights. And Harrington's population kind of has been very, we'll say, up and down. We actually, several years back, had a die-off of white bass, which has happened at the lake on occasion throughout its history. Right now, I think those populations are starting to come back. I just don't think as many people do that as much. And that may be because in certain years, the fishing was down. But that's the only instance I can think of that people doing that. But.
Okay, I've heard of people doing that there as well, but it's something I've not really done. I've never targeted white bass at night, but that's interesting. May have to give that a try. Tim in Jefferson County, why can't you fish piers near the Ohio River? I'm not sure what he's asking about there. Any ideas? Mm-hmm. Any rules or regulations as far as law enforcement goes on?
Unless there's some kind of special reg there that they're not allowed to, fish close to the lock or something like that. That's got a special restriction. Other than that, I don't know.
Okay.
My guess would be safety.
Okay. May want to give, again, make sure you give our Department of Fish and Wildlife a call. And a lot of these questions that are very, very specific, you may get, we're here to answer your questions, but you may get a more specific answer if you call, because you're a biologist for which area?
Central Fishery District.
And you've got a lot of biologists that you communicate with. You might be able to get a hold of a biologist that knows that area very, very closely, and we may not know the answer to that, but you give them a call and they'll make sure they get you in contact with a biologist that can help you out. That number again is 1-800-858-1549. George in Madison County is wanting to know why they quit taking care of Wilgreen Lake. I think he feels like we're not doing much of Wilgreen Lake.
Well, Wilgreen, I think, is actually for sale.
Okay.
So
is it privately owned then?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, the city owns it.
Okay.
So we're still, we've done stuff on it every year. We sample the fish, and I think we stock catfish there, and we're putting sawguy in there, and I think we put blue cats in there.
Okay.
But it is for sale, so its status is kind of up in the air right now.
Okay. All right. Janet, this is a Facebook question, wants to know if there's a place to bank fish for stripers on Lake Cumberland near Somerset. Any ideas on any places that you'd recommend bank fishing for stripers?
Probably.
Dam?
Well, in Somerset, though.
Oh, in Somerset, yeah.
So I don't know if the state park has areas, or anywhere that you could find some of our boat access or our boat ramp areas may have some area alongside of them. That would be a good question. What you're talking about is call Marcy Anderson in the Southeastern District, and she'd have a much better idea of some of those specific areas.
Because she probably communicates with people and knows who's catching fish down there.
That's their area, so they'll know a lot of those bank fishing areas. And along with calling in, we have a page in our guide, which, by the way, is coming out next week.
Okay.
That has all the districts listed in their phone numbers.
Okay.
So,
we'd have to have a big table to have all 7 district biologists in here. But so there are quite a few biologists. So you're one of 7 that oversee a district. So if you want more specific information, definitely reach out to us, and we'll be glad to give you that. That's exactly what you guys do. You love getting those phone calls and telling people, hey, here's what we're seeing, right? Marty in Owen County. What happened to Eagle Creek in Owen County? He said he's not seeing a whole lot of fish there. You guys familiar with Eagle Creek in Owen County?
A little bit. We've sampled it at times. We see some nice fish. Again, low numbers. When we compare it back to Elkhorn Creek, it's kind of like Floyd's Fork. We see some nice smallmouth, just lower numbers, but we do see fish. Again, this is probably part of, like Jeff was talking about earlier, we do have that new stream branch, and so they're going to be looking at a lot of places like that. And we try to sample it again when the weather's appropriate. When we in different years, and we have sampled it. But again, we haven't seen a ton of a change, but we haven't been on it for a while too. So.
Getting some question here about smallmouth bass. I've got a question here from Dan. Wants to know why Lake Malone and Bashir are not being stocked with smallmouth bass. I don't know if they are or not, but
No, and we actually don't stock. We stocked smallmouth years ago, more of a study on elkhorn, just checking survival of different, raising them on minnows versus pellets. It was more of a research study, but we don't even have them in our hatcheries right now. So that's not, and the smallmouth have a very specific kind of temperature habitat that they need, a cooler water habitat a lot of times in the lakes, and I don't think either one of those lakes would probably support them very well.
it takes a very unique lake to support smallmouth bass, doesn't it?
Yes, it does.
And I know there was another question here about Paintsville Lake. At one point in time, we did stock some smallmouth in there.
Yeah, we did stock them there.
How did that turn out?
They just didn't take very well. The walleye and the smallmouth there have struggled. And it probably is, the same thing with habitat and not having the right cool temperature during the summer for them. So we did stock them there, but they just did not take very well. We've had a lot of lakes that we've stocked them in that didn't take well.
I have a question from Avery, who's 8 years old. He lives in Barren County. He wants to know, apparently he wants to catch bass. He wants to know what the best lure to catch bass with. How can we help Avery out?
There's a lot of different lures. I think for a kid, just starting out with a plastic worm is a great way to go. It's easy. I think you just try to keep it simple for a kid especially. And that's always a go-to, even on a bad day, it's a good go-to bait. So I'd start with something like that before I would move up toward, crankbaits and all this other stuff.
And I tell you what, if young Avery's wanting to handle those fish and take them off the hook, those treble hooks can be rough on an 8-year-old. You got to be very cautious. So I think something soft plastic would probably be a really, really good way to go. And you don't have to move it that much. Just cast it out there and move it a little bit, especially when the water's cold. Good luck to you, Avery. Send us a picture. Make sure when you catch that fish, you send us a picture of the ones that didn't get away. Very interested in seeing that. Larry from Franklin County. How bad did the whiskey spill hurt the Kentucky River below Frankfort? What'd you guys see? There's been some questions come through about, I haven't seen them here, but I read them on Facebook, so I know we have some questions on the whiskey spill. What can you guys tell us?
It impacted pools 3 and 2 pretty significantly. So, we saw quite a few fish in that area. It did impact a little bit further, below that also, but it killed several fish.
Yeah.
It was a pretty good impact to that river.
People want to know what the recovery plan is going to be and how we're going to use the funds. And at this point in time, we don't even know what the funds are going to be, right?
Yeah, they're still in legal process, so we don't know that. We have stocked, and we continue to stock muskie, sauger. We put some blue cats in.
We're stocking hybrids in the upper part of the river, which a lot of those will funnel down toward those pools. So.
There will be some natural, movement to fill in as well.
We're not trying to hide anything at this point in time. This is still legally pending, and there's really no answers that we have for that right now. Caldwell County, what is the best place to fish for white bass on Lake Barkley? I guess that's going to depend on what time of year you're fishing for them too. But
Yeah, I think-
any ideas on a good way to target white bass
I
on
think they
Barkley?
get them along those, you know, the creek channels in the lake for sure. I think a lot of people troll, and I think, I don't know what else they use for them out there. I know the creek channels, you know, it's a good area to target for sure.
Okay. Hey, we're getting tons of questions today. We definitely appreciate you reaching out. There's tons of information out there about fishing in the state of Kentucky. Please make sure that if you have a question that we didn't get to, that you either reach out to us or you go to our website. There's so much information on there. Like I said, there is a new app that's going to be coming out. It's going to be later on in the year. When it comes out, look for it. You're going to want to make sure you download that on your phone. It's got all kinds of great information on it. Adrian from Mason County, what is the best month to start bluegill fishing? Well, you can bluegill fish any month, but what's the best month to catch bluegill?
I think the best month is May. I mean,
Yeah.
that's when they're going to be spawning. That's when they'll be on their nests in pretty good groups. And they're pretty easy to catch at that time too. So I think that May is the best time. But you know, we were on a lake the other day and we saw them catching bluegill and red ear on that lake, you know, a couple of weeks ago. So yeah, I think you can catch them just about any time. But May is probably about the best time.
We have a gentleman here from Spencer County. It's not a fisheries question, but I'm going to get to it because he's 48 years old and he wants to know if a career with the Kentucky Department of Fish and Wildlife is still an option for his age. If so, how does he go about it? Interestingly enough, we hire some seasonal people, and a lot of times it's people just like him that like to fish, that wants to be a creel clerk. Give us a call.
Yes, we have several crew clerks that several of them have been, you know, he may not be retired, but we've actually, Jeff's got a great
Retired.
crew clerk that's worked for several years for him.
He's retired. He does a great job.
Get to ride out on the lake, you know, several times a month and talk to all the anglers, find out where they're catching fish. I mean, it's a good job.
I know some people that have done that, and they absolutely love that job.
Yep.
Alan, and you know, there's other careers too. I mean,
Oh, yeah.
really, if you
Yep.
want to know about Fish and Wildlife, it's you go through the personnel portal,
Yep.
and you go log on, and you tell them what you're interested in, and you'll get a notification about every job opening within the Department of Fish and
Yep.
Wildlife. I'm just talking about one in specific, but there's permanent careers, and hey, 48 is not too old
No.
to start a career with the Department of Fish and Wildlife. Alan from Barren County wants to know what happened to the smallmouth in Barren County. A lot of people want to know about smallmouth bass, and it's a very difficult species in some of these lakes.
Yeah, and I don't know, you know, if he's talking streams or what.
But a lot of it comes down to habitat. I mean,
Yeah.
we've kind of talked about that. Even in the lakes where they don't do well, it's generally a habitat or water quality issue. Same thing in streams. You know, we get a lot of our streams deal with a lot of habitat manipulations, degradation, a lot of siltation, and that really affects smallmouth, which, you know, needs some pretty, you know, quality water to survive.
Yeah, high water in the spring can really impact them too.
We've got some locations people are asking about. Want to know about reopening Big Bone Lake. Anybody know anything about Big Bone in Grant County?
Big Bone, they had a leak issue,
Okay.
and they had to drain it because they were worried about the dam failure. To my knowledge, there's no plans of fixing that. So because that's state parks, that's on their property. So as of right now, I mean, I know of no plans of them fixing that lake.
Okay. John from Harrison County, hey, this is an interesting question. He wants to know why the Alabama rig was banned. Alabama rig was not banned,
It's not
right?
banned, and there's some states that have restrictions on number of hooks and such, but in Kentucky, it's allowed.
It's allowed. Now, there are some tournaments that have banned it, but that's not a
Yeah.
ban that came from the Department of Fish and
Right, there's no
Wildlife.
regulation.
Now, you got to be cautious if you are fishing lakes that go into Tennessee, because I think their rules and regs are 3 hooks, if I'm not mistaken. Don't quote me on that. You have to check with Tennessee. But I think the rules and regulations are different in Tennessee for Alabama rig or multiple hook rigs. But Alabama rig's alive and well in the state of Kentucky. Rick from Woodford County, are you allowed to fish on the Corps of Engineer property on Kentucky River near Woodford County? Any information, or you guys have any information on that?
I'm guessing that they're maybe talking about High Bridge. All those, I believe a lot of those locks and dams on the Kentucky River are owned by the Kentucky River Authority.
Okay.
And so it would be, my guess is no. because that's a dangerous spot to be, especially if you fall in. But you probably want to check with the Kentucky River Authority on that.
Okay. Anthony from Powell County wants to know if krill limits reset at midnight for night fishing purposes. He wants to know how can he, if he fishes puts in at dark and catches his limit, does it start over at midnight?
Technically, it does, because it's a new day, it's a new krill limit. You just can't go over your possession limit for 2 or 3 days or whatever it is what he's fishing for.
So yeah, and most of your possession limits is twice your krill limits in most situations, right? So I tell you what, our anglers out there, they're getting more savvy with the law, because we didn't get as many questions. They've been very good questions, but we didn't get as many questions for you tonight. So your first day on the job here,
that's right.
It's been pretty easy.
Yes, sir.
Danny from Campbell County, how do the catfish at AJ Jolly look this year? Any ideas there?
We haven't sampled them for a little bit, but when we have done like hoop nets for the channels, they look good.
Okay, good.
We haven't looked at the blues for a while, and so, but they should be doing well. They have been in the past, but.
This guy wants to catch lizards and salamanders in the Daniel Boone Forest and fish with them. Is there any rules or regulations on that?
That'd have to be something with the forester if they had.
Yeah, I would
that
check
have
with
a special
them.
rig.
We do in our live bait for personal use rig have specific amounts of each type of live bait, so he wants to make sure he knows what he's collecting and talk to the Forest Service first.
Boone County question here. Rainbow trout restocking. Wants to know, we've already talked a little bit about that. There was also a question about walleye stocking in Laurel Lake. We're still.
Yeah, we stock that every year.
All right. I'd say what everybody wants to catch walleye and soccer, and those are great questions this time of year, because this is the time of year to fish for those particular species. They're cold water fish, and this is a great time to go after them. Hey, this is a good time for me to let you know that Kentucky Afield will be preempted for the next 2 weeks, so make sure you join us. We're going to be back on the air on March 14th, and we're going fishing. Make sure you tune in and see what we caught.